Welcome to the 15th episode of FarmED podcast. My name is Ed, I'm the program coordinator here at FarmED, and we're joined by Sheila Cooke from 3LM today. How are you doing, Sheila?
Hi Ed, it's really nice to be with you, thank you.
I'm really glad we've got a short space of time on the course today. So we're doing a holistic management course, which we've spread over the whole year. And yeah, we've kind of snuck away from the busyness of the day just to chat through what holistic management is. So I don't know, is there a way in which you can describe that in a brief way for people who perhaps haven't heard of it before?
Yeah, holistic management really simply is a framework for decision making. And it's easy to think about like what are the outcomes that a person will get. So it's going to improve economic outcomes, social outcomes, and ecological outcomes. But it's not going to sacrifice. Like, it's not like you get the economic and then you sacrifice the social. You can actually get all three. And building one is going to support the other two. And it's managing by principles and questions. It's leading by questions. And it enables the person to come up with the right solutions for them. It's not a one-size-fits-all. And it helps us to adapt to nature, and it helps us to adapt to our specific situation.
No, that's great to hear. And I think what comes to mind for me sometimes with holistic management within the kind of excitement of regenerative agriculture, people immediately defer to this idea of mob grazing. It's all about grazing in tight cells, which to me speaks to a process, a kind of tool you might use, whereas it sounds like what you're talking about is being more outcomes focused and actually questioning the tool you're using. It's almost the last thing you look at, as opposed to with what you're talking about being kind of outcomes led. Is that, I understand that right?
Yeah, I think you're right. And mob grazing, first of all, it's hard to even know what that means, because I think it varies a lot from person to person and what they mean. And you're right, it's just a tool. And it relies on only one of the four key insights in holistic management, which is this idea of a predator-prey connection, and that grasses co-evolved with this relationship between predators and prey. But yeah, that's true. But when we only use that one key insight, we're missing a lot. And actually, we're leaving a lot of money on the table when we do that. And it would be worth actually, like mob grazing would be a good step away from set stock grazing. And it would be a good way for a farmer to experiment and say, maybe I should do something different. And they will discover some great benefit in doing mob grazing. It's just that there's a whole lot more that's possible. And so when a person is ready, then the next logical step would be holistic management. And they'll actually earn a lot more money when they do that.
So when would you say generally, is there a general trend of when someone is ready? Is it they just really need the extra cash and that's that sale of like knowing they're going to make more money, or is there something else that determines when someone feels ready to take that next step?
It's different for every person. Sometimes it is financial pressure, and when we look around the world, that financial pressure is the most common reason that farmers go that next step to holistic management. But the key characteristic is the person starts questioning everything. And they're making some observations that they've never made before. And they're starting to wonder, maybe everything I was taught could be wrong. And so then they're wondering, well, what's right? And they go on a hunt. They go on a learning journey, and they're asking lots of questions. And the sure sign of someone who's ready is that they're reading lots of books, and they're listening to lots of YouTubes and lots of podcasts. They may be listening to books, Kindle books. And they're just asking lots and lots of questions. and they're not getting answers, at least ones that are satisfactory. And so then they end up in a holistic management class, is typically how it goes.
And you found that this year we've obviously had quite a good cohort of different farmers, different land workers this year. Is that kind of a general trend you're seeing there? Lots of questioning?
Yeah, we get a nice broad mix of people. We get lots of farmers, but we also get land workers, like you said. And just the general citizen is very interested in learning holistic management. And holistic management, although it was developed for agriculture, businesses, it applies to any business. So any business could benefit. You could use it to manage a family, a community, a nation. It scales up, it scales down. So it has relevance to any business.
Great, and you gave some examples, I think, in an earlier conversation, when you, obviously what you just said there around managing a nation, around how this has actually been used within politics, and part of holistic management even moves to the policy level.
Yes.
Share anything about that?
Yeah, there's holistic policy, and if we could do holistic policy, it would be really wonderful. And where holistic policy making would start is really asking the question, what's the problem that we're trying to solve? And then what's the underlying root cause of the problem? Because sometimes in policy, we're neither identifying the problem correctly, and we're not even looking at the underlying root cause. And so most policy is misguided. And it leads to unintended consequences, and it doesn't achieve the objective that it set out to achieve. But holistic policy, that would all be built into the design. So we would really be sure that our policy is addressing that underlying root cause of the problem and encouraging the behavior that we want to see. And then, because we would use the feedback loop, we make the decision about the policy, but then we monitor. Did we really get the behavior change that we wanted in whatever group we're making a policy for? And if not, then we need to take some controlling action, and we may need to just say, well, that whole thing was a great learning experience, now let's start over again. And we call that replanning. So that's one of the things when we're dealing with complexity, we need to take a bit of humility to that and acknowledge we could be wrong. A policy could just plain be wrong, and we need the humility to say, well, let's try it again.
Yeah, and I think that feels like a very refreshing way of looking at things. We've spoken a lot in this course around assuming we're wrong, and the kind of prior way of seeing a farm as a kind of entirely controlled system that we can be sure or guaranteed that things will change, often with chemicals or quite aggressive forms of management. This takes a step away from that, and we almost have to double check that we are right, rather than assuming that that's the case.
That's absolutely right, because we look at the farm as a living organism, which is very complex. Yeah. So every decision that we make, we need to monitor to make sure, are we achieving what we set out to achieve?
Right. So this year's been brilliant, and we're going to be working together again next year. So we'll be running a holistic management course over 4 modules,
yeah,
3 days, 3
yeah.
days each. Could you give, in brief, just for people who might be interested, what might they take away from those 4 modules?
Well, first of all, I love the format that we're doing at FarmED, and it's really worked really well. And so we get to take a luxurious 12 days, but it's broken up into 4. So each session is 3 days. And the first one is the fundamentals of holistic management, and it's where we learn all the key concepts and the decision making, and we learn how to create a holistic context for ourselves. So that provides the foundation for everything that follows. Next, we do holistic financial planning, which is really going to help the individual focus. It's all about the focus and what can I focus on this year that's really going to assist me to be wealth generating, and not just profit. We're also talking about how are we going to generate healthy soil. And that's a big source of our wealth if we're farmers. So we need to be constantly focused on that. The next one is holistic planned grazing, and that's when we're grazing animals on land, that's very complex. And in most other grazing systems, we're reducing all that complexity to something very simple, which it isn't. And so because we're able to incorporate all that complexity into a grazing plan, our grazing can be adaptive to what's happening on our farm this year. And the net result of it is we're going to grow more grass. Our animals will be healthier and will be more profitable as a result. And I think it's more humane for animals as well, because they're going to be on fresh grass quicker, and we won't need to put wormers in them and those kind of, their parasite burden will get very low and things like that. And then the last class is ecological monitoring and land planning. And so because we have that feedback loop where we plan, but we assume we're wrong because we're dealing with complexity, we need a really good way to monitor. And when we're dealing with land, it's at the soil surface where we can observe the quickest signs of change. So we learn how do we observe the signs of change, and it's possible for farmers to do this by themselves, and within 3 months they can see, is my management moving me in the direction that I wanted? Is it regenerating my land? And I just think it's so remarkable that Alan Savory came up with super simple techniques that don't cost any money. We don't have to send anything to a laboratory or buy a microscope. We can, but through these very simple techniques, we can observe, are we regenerating soil? And so those are the 4 big topics that we cover. And what I love about the way we're doing it at FarmED is we come every month for 3 days. So that means we bite off a chunk, and then we go away and we can practice what we learned and come back and talk about it. And it just gives us a way to go deeper. And then people are really building relationships with each other, and I think that supports their learning as well.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that what FarmED is really here for is inspiring people, which this course is really doing, to see what else is possible. Educating them, training them in the actual skills to do the monitoring, the planning, the grazing, and then connecting. And I can see there's been a real kind of community emerge over the last year, fueled by cake largely. That's really great just to get that overview, and I think hopefully, in line with what you were sharing, that's kind of given some listeners more questions to ask. So there's loads of information out online on YouTube and lots of resources available, but really if you want to get a whole picture and dive in, then I guess the key thing would be to book on for next year and join the team.
Yes, and I would encourage, if someone is wondering and they're kind of on the fence, please contact me, and I'm happy to speak with people and answer their specific questions.
Great. Well, thank you. And we'll put your contact details and things in the link.
That would be great. Yeah.
But let's get back into the course.
Thank you, Ed.
Bye-bye.